But we begin here with our big story. President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking today for the first time in over a month, and that's according to a source familiar with this planned call. Netanyahu saying in a televised statement that he and President Biden discussed, quote, the latest developments in the war, including Israel's commitment to achieving all goals of the war. Now, this follows the president's hot mic moment. After his State of the Union address earlier this month, he was heard saying that he and Netanyahu needed to have a, quote, come to Jesus meeting over the dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Now, this all coming as a United Nations-backed report warns that famine is imminent in northern Gaza and can happen anytime between now and May. The findings show that 70% of the population in that part of the territory, over 200,000 people, are experiencing, quote, catastrophic hunger. Now, the data also looking at the entire population of the Gaza Strip, over 2 million people, showing a grim projection of the Palestinian civilians facing acute food insecurity. By July, more than 1 million people could be facing a catastrophe. Now, in the meantime, Israeli forces today launching what it calls a high-precision military raid on Gaza's main hospital. The IDF accusing Hamas militants of using Al-Shifa Hospital as a base, directing attacks from the compound. The Hamas-run Ministry of Health rejecting those claims and saying that at least 20 Gazans were killed in that military operation, calling the raid a violation of international humanitarian law. Now, in the backdrop of all of this, Israel preparing to launch a ground offensive in Gaza's southernmost city of Rafah, despite international calls to abandon that plan. It's where over 1 million Palestinian civilians have sought safety as the war rages on. So joining me for more on this is the Global Humanitarian Director for CARE, Mala Mahela. Thank you so much for being here with us. We really appreciate it. And let's jump right in here. We're starting to hear that one of the biggest issues right now isn't necessarily supplies, but instead it's distribution, that people that are on the ground trying to distribute aid don't feel safe getting to some of these territories. So what are you hearing from people there?
What we are hearing is absolutely catastrophic. So first of all, it's not that people are not feeling safe. People are actually not safe. Nowhere in Gaza, it is safe. It is not safe. And as you said, first of all, there isn't enough aid into Gaza. Well, there is a lot of aid in trucks waiting just a few miles away from the people who are in desperate need. And if and when the very inadequate amount of aid that reaches, it is very hard to make sure that it reaches the vulnerable people because there are continuous attacks and bombardments happening. The roads are destroyed. There are piles of rubble. And aid workers, like the rest of the people in Gaza, are themselves very affected as well. So we are hearing of a situation which is completely unprecedented. Being humanitarians, delivering humanitarian assistance in war zones within an armed conflict is not new for us. We have done it in several other contexts. But the severity, the speed at which it happened, the depth, the breadth of it is absolutely unparalleled. No humanitarian has ever seen a catastrophe of this level. And what makes it saddest, it is human-made. It could have been preventable. It is still preventable.
On that note here, we saw today that the U.S. had to cancel an airdrop because of what they say was an Israeli operation inside Gaza. Israeli authorities are claiming that they place no limits on the entry of aid. They're accusing UN bodies of failing to distribute it, though, in a timely manner. Do you think that that is at least part of what's happening here?
It's hugely ironic that these conversations are happening when people are literally starving to death. 23 children, and the youngest one of them starved to death. Let's imagine for a second, what is it for a mom to see her child perish right in front of her? There are babies, little babies, most of them underweight, in incubators, and the electricity is available only for a few hours. People are having to eat grass, make bread out of animal feed. While all this is happening, these conversations around airdrops and piers, maritime corridors, these are happening. Well, aid by any medium is welcome. However, the most efficient, fast, systematic way is through land routes. Why don't we open all those borders and let the trucks in? If we really want to save lives, we have to have a sustained ceasefire. We have to ensure humanitarians get to reach people, and we have to protect humanitarians. The situation is beyond dire. And I would say all this is avoidable. It is a political choice. What is happening in Gaza is a political choice.
And let's talk about the ceasefire here. Talks have started once again for a ceasefire, but even if it's agreed upon, I mean, that could still be weeks away. So give us an idea of what happens in those weeks. And do you think that a ceasefire at this point is the only way to get aid to the people who need it?
Ceasefire is the first prerequisite, because how can we save lives when there are bombs falling from the sky all the time? Can anyone mop the floor while the tap is continuously on? So yes, a ceasefire, and a sustained one, an immediate one. To your question, what happens till the ceasefire happens? The world is watching and people are dying. Every single day, every single hour. No humanitarian crisis has seen this level of death and fatality in one day. And also, I would say people are starving to death. We hear it all the time. People are starving to death. People are being starved to death. There is food available, ready on the doors. And also, because people have not had clean water and people have not had health services. So what is happening is disease outbreak, poor immune systems, infectious disease. And as bad as it sounds, between starvation and death, there is usually disease. And because the health system is pretty much collapsed, people who are in dire need, along with the malnutrition they are facing, they are one step closer to dying. So a humanitarian crisis, I thought it cannot get worse. It cannot get worse. Last 5 months, I have been thinking it cannot get worse. And I'm wrong every single day because it keeps getting worse. 1.1 million people in Gaza are facing catastrophic levels of hunger. I mean, this is beyond imagination. However, this is reality in front of us every single day. So, if a ceasefire happens, I hope it does. Can we save all these lives? No, because the situation has deteriorated to that level. The essential services have been destroyed to that level. So even if we act now, we will still be playing catch up. There is no time left. And I would again say, every starving child dying in Gaza right now is a policy failure.
Deepmala Mahela, thank you so much for your insight into this. And we want to bring our big story now to our panel here. So joining us today is our ABC News contributor and SiriusXM radio host Mike Muse, ABC News political contributor and senior editor for The Dispatch, Sarah Isker, Democratic strategist and president of Next Gen America, Christina Cinsu Ramirez, and ABC News contributor and op-ed columnist for the Los Angeles Times, LZ Granderson. Thank you all so much for being here with us. LZ, I want to start here with you. And actually, I'd love to just get your reaction to what she just said there, that essentially every starving child that's dying right now in Gaza is the result of a policy failure. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to what she said. You know, I don't want to get completely in the weeds in terms of the whole history of the region and who started what. But if you're looking strictly on October 7th, you really have to begin asking yourself, how did this intelligence failure begin with Benjamin Netanyahu's government? How were they able to get this entire terrorist plot going right next door to some of their security outposts? So when you start asking yourself these questions, there eventually someone has to bear responsibility for where we are today based upon October 7th. And a lot of that does have to do with Benjamin Netanyahu. And keep in mind, he has been on trial in Israel since 2020. So calls in the United States to question his leadership are intact with what's been going on in Israel amongst the citizens themselves.
And Christina, to you, and we know that Biden and Netanyahu spoke for the first time in over a month today. A key outcome of this call is that, at least for now, Israel's agreed to send a team of military intelligence and humanitarian officials to Washington to hear the U.S. concerns about Israel's current plan to move into Rafah. Do you think the administration will make any headway there?
What I can tell you is that it's very clear that the administration is signaling, not just from that hot mic that we heard, but even folks like Chuck Schumer, the highest ranking elected Jewish official in the country, saying that if Bibi Netanyahu continues to be the leader of Israel, that this country will become a global pariah. We can see from the Biden administration to Schumer, that there is extreme unhappiness with the leadership of Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, they met with his opposition leader in D.C. just a few weeks ago. And so it's not surprising, given that if you study Netanyahu, he has never supported the self-determination of the Palestinian people. And he's used, according to some, the deaths of 1,200 Israelis and hostages to kill 30,000 Palestinians, 72,000 injured, 75% of the population displaced, and the entire population left eating dirt and animal feed.
Well, I don't know that everyone would agree that he's using that as an excuse, and as he has said, he is going after Hamas. And Sarah, I guess to you, how is it viewed on the world stage when American leadership, somewhat threatens the political future of an ally? Of course, noting that there was political unrest in Israel prior to the October attack.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the idea that who's responsible for the terrorist attack on October 7th is the leadership who didn't stop the terrorist attack on October 7th and not the terrorists is sort of a mind-blowing notion to me. But regardless, I always like to imagine what we would be saying right now if Donald Trump had done something similar. Imagine if Donald Trump had said, we need a new election in Mexico for new leaders because the current president of Mexico will not agree to my remain in Mexico policy and the border is in crisis. Look at the people dying. Look at the humanitarian issues. And by the way, if you don't agree to have an election, we will withhold aid. We'll, force you to come to the table for all sorts of other sort of American needs that you might have. We would be saying that Donald Trump broke norms, was breaking international consensus over how democracies treat each other. It's bonkers.
It's bonkers, and it's also what it is right now, Mike, is it's tragic. And when I was speaking with Deep Mala, something resonated with me that I hadn't quite thought of yet, that there is this aid sitting right outside the door that can help people, and that they just cannot get it to some of these starving people because it is so unsafe for these workers, these aid workers, to move through Gaza. And sometimes, people have to point their finger at Hamas for making that so unsafe to get aid to their people.
Exactly, but that's a challenge right now with going and creating a ground defense in Rafah with 1.5 million Palestinian people which have sought refuge in Rafah. But creating such a ground defense will actually close off what is remaining access to Egypt and to other possibilities for aid to get in there smoothly and in safely. The challenge with getting aid in there right now is that the people are so starved for humanitarian needs that they are willing to do whatever they can to get a hold of those convoys trucks, even if it's worth risking their lives. And so what's interesting is you see the gap between what Sullivan did the readout today with the call that he had with Benjamin Netanyahu. There still is a wide policy gap between Netanyahu and Biden. I don't know if there is a way to get to the middle, but they seem to be squarely in their corners.
And she also noted that even if a ceasefire were agreed upon in the next coming weeks, that more lives will be lost between now and then, and even in the aftermath. That's how bad things have gotten there in Gaza. Mike, Sarah, Christina, and LZ, our thanks to all of you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.